In a March 2024 article entitled Jack Hibbs Says Critics of Christian Nationalism Are Literal Cancers, written by Kyle Mantela for Right Wing Watch, we see Jack Hibbs not only comparing Christian critics to Nazis, but also to socialists, which I thought was pretty odd because fascists and socialists are on the complete opposite sides of the political spectrum. Couldn't be more different, many would say. But I want to turn to our panel to get their take on how this anti-LGBTQ plus and conspiracy theorist pastor, who clearly does not understand politics, nor history for that matter, is being invited to the House floor to deliver prayer by our Secretary of State, Mike Johnson. Is it constitutional? Is it appropriate? Kelly, I want to harken back to this idea that this guy really doesn't know anything about political science or history. I mean, you had issue with the fact that this guy stated God was removed from American history after 1925. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this guy's troubled connection to history?
He has railed against historical revisionism, and he says that we are now living under a revisionist history. And all the time, he is himself revising American history. Now, as an example, he claimed that, as you mentioned, God was removed from American history in 1925. I have no idea what he's talking about. God has not been removed from American history. In fact, we added in God We Trust to the coins in the 1950s. I really honestly don't get what he's talking about. And I don't know of anyone else that understands what he means by that. But he also has claimed that he does not read any history books that were written after 1925. So I don't know where he would get this information at anyway. You know, and he's also claimed that George Washington should be added to the Bible and that Massachusetts had never had legal slavery. Well, I don't want to say adding George Washington to the Bible would be wrong. I personally think it is, but the Massachusetts slavery thing is definitely wrong. And anybody with a Google can check it out. So with a Google.
Kelly, where does this guy think George Washington would actually fit in the Bible? Any thoughts on what that could look like?
I'm not actually sure, but one of the stories that I've heard about George Washington from revisionists is that he wore out the toes of his boots through kneeling in prayer during the Revolutionary War. Well, it's a bullshit story. It never occurred. It's never been documented anywhere. We don't even have documentation of George Washington praying all the time during the Revolutionary War. But it kind of fits that still idea that George Washington was this great Christian. And maybe that's what he's talking about. Otherwise, I don't really know. I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that. I do know that George Washington was a great dancer. So I don't know if anybody's ever heard that
too.
Yeah. But I want to stick with this idea of maybe history and political science, if you will. Cynthia, you talked about Hibbs' comments on constitutional republic versus democracy. When we were chatting earlier, you kind of made note of the differences there. What is this guy talking about when he talks about anti-Christian nationalists and their connection to republics versus democracy?
Well, he actually mentioned in the video, if you actually take a look at the Right Wing Watch article, that those who are against Christian nationalism always mention democracy, but they never mention constitutional republic. And I'm like, okay, sir. So by definition, a republic is a representative form of government that is ruled according to a charter or a constitution. And a democracy is a government that is ruled according to the will of the majority. And my thing is this. Did you not have a majority of Christian nationalists go against the representative form of governments to try to take over the congressional building and find representatives to cause them harm? So who is actually against the republic now? Like, for real. And as we covered the mind of Christian nationalists, it should not be an ideology that anyone actually aspires to. Hibbs also even mentioned being against the family, but Christian nationalist lawmakers often push against any social programs to support families. He even mentioned that people who are anti-Christian nationalists are for everyone's rights except the ones who agree with them. Yet we covered over and over again how can lawmakers and leaders are constantly going against the rights of human beings all the time. At this point, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And anything to fit their narrative.
Exactly. And so that's a good segue to get into Blayton's point. Blayton, you mentioned that this is clearly a case of one side enforcing their beliefs to make one side enforcing their beliefs. Can you expand on that? What do you mean by that?
I mean, if you just look at how this guy was invited to our nation's house, you know what I mean? Like, this is the house of America. Like, this guy was invited knowing all of these things that he believes, knowing all these things that he said in the past, not just things from this article, but just looking at his history, the fact that he was invited by not just a House member, the House leader.
Yeah.
This just goes to show, like, okay, these are our beliefs. These are the people that we are going to platform. This is what we are pushing. And as just like Kelly was talking about revisionist history, I love how Christians love to revise that the Nazis that they're comparing us to were Christians. Like, how can we finally get this conversation pushed to the side? Like, just iron this out, because I don't understand what the confusion is. That's the revisionist history. And then along with that, just like Cynthia was saying with his quotes, I'm just going to go ahead and read his whole quote and I'll respond in kind. So Hibbs said, the people that are labeling us Christian nationalists are the ones who are for the destruction of the gender of a child's biological birth. And I say to that, yeah, sort of, because gender is a social construct. It doesn't even need to be destroyed because it's something that we freaking made up. He goes on to say, just like Cynthia said, they're anti-family. No, we're patriarchal, however you say the word. We're anti-patriarchy. That's what we are anti. We are anti being forced into the family that you want us to have. Then he says, literally, this, I don't know if there was a misquote or like what, but this is what the article says. He says they are pro-LBGTQ. I'll just say yes, and I'll correct you that it's LGBTQ and plus because I am for all of them. Well, and then he says, then he goes, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it sounds like he's taking everybody that opposes his views, right, or opposes the Christian national views, but lumping them into one group, one monolithic group of people, as if none of us, and I consider myself one, as if none of us have any differences between us. I think we probably, all of us on this panel, may, in fact, be different people, right? And we may look at things and have different opinions, but what does that say about, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, if you will, devil's advocate, but I want to know, what does that say about people's perception of skeptics? Do we maybe group these people into one monolithic group? And is this guy Hibbs a poor representation of other people who just find themselves sucked into this situation? What do you guys think? Anybody's game?
Well, I would say that I don't necessarily think that it is being a blanketed statement that says that Christian nationalists happen to think a certain way because there's a certain definition that they usually fall into. And I know that, like, we just covered about a week ago a new article from PRRI that actually talked about Christian nationalists and how you had about 55% of the GOP specifically who, identify as Christian nationalists, either adherents or sympathizers, who would basically have some of the same sentiments as Jack Hibbs, And I think it's very interesting how he, and I understand, like, you are wanting to, like, try to steelman his point of view, and readily so. But it's very difficult to do that when we see how he was using certain points that he was making and seeing how they were not true. You know, especially when it comes to the whole thing about being anti-family, being pro LGBTQ people, and how he's basically lumping all these things as basically anti-American.
I want to make another point too, that when we talk about Christian nationalists and you're saying 55% of the GOP, I'm not sure that that whole 55% understands the term Christian nationalism the way we do. So when they identify as Christian nationalists, they think, oh, I'm a Christian and I'm for the nation of America. That makes me a Christian nationalist. And they're not really Christian nationalists like Hibbs is here. So I just wanted to make that point. As long as we were steel manning, I wanted to make that point that I don't know that all 55% of the people who said they were Christian nationalists really understand what that term means.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Can I make a point really quick?
Please
though?
go ahead.
Sure.
So just like based on the PRRI article that I brought up, there were like specific questions that were asked to people who were being surveyed concerning where they kind of fall politically and ideologically, and how they would possibly fit in that framework, that mind framework of what we know about as Christian nationalists. I believe that the survey actually had about 22,000 people who were surveyed all through all 50 of the states. And that's where we are getting mostly where they're falling as far as like their political viewpoints are concerned.
Fair enough.
Even though they're not necessarily saying like, okay, well, yes, I am a Christian nationalist and really understand fundamentally what that means definition wise, like you and I would, but still, with the questions I was asked to them concerning about if they were either adherents of the Christian nationalist viewpoint or even sympathized with it, they fall into that category. So I just wanted to make that point clear.
Blayton, any parting shots on that topic before I move on?
The only thing I would say is just that last portion that Cynthia hinted at, that he was, the quote from him saying that these people are for everyone's rights unless they don't agree with them. And I just want to say, if that's not the pot calling the kettle the N-word, I don't know what is.
Sure.
So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there because we see these people not just rail against, but make laws against, fight against, protest against anything that doesn't go straight along with what they want. Anything that's not for the patriarchy, anything that's not Christian nationalist. If somebody says, hey, we need to help these people, you're an enemy of the state. So yeah, that's all I got for him.
And that would have been the direction I wanted this conversation to go, because I think the pastor talking about people that oppose him, using that opposition to paint everybody else as others, is kind of quite the pot calling the kettle black, I'll say. But you know, it's more of the same narrative that we see with these nationalists accusing their opposers of doing the very same thing that they're doing. And we see this in many cases, and us on the nonprofits. I mean, we do this for a living, don't we? But we come across, articles. Excuse me. I think I'm catching something from the guy down on my left there. But we see this across the country with laws being repealed, children being affected, and you know, I think this idea of people being wrapped up in this movement, and they don't even really understand what it is. Shouldn't they, or don't they understand that their alliances or allegiances are causing harm to other people? What are your Kelly? I see you shaking your head. No. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they don't care. Okay. I think they know it causes harm and they don't care, because the ends justify the means. We're going to get everybody to be a good Christian follower, so it doesn't matter how we do it, even if we have to hurt these people into being a good Christian follower. That's it. They know they're hurting people, but they just don't care. That's what I think.
And I think it's obvious that they don't care, because this man gets up and makes outlandish claims and he doesn't even care if they're true or not. Between putting George Washington in the Bible, or Massachusetts never legalizing slavery, to taking two political movements and juxtaposing them or combining them, as if they were the same exact thing. You know, it's these people that listen to this that, you know, are not only part of the problem, but they're in their own right, in their own way, victimized. I wanted to see if any of you had thoughts on that. I mean, how to what extent, to what level are these followers actually, you know, being taken advantage of as well?
I think it comes with the indoctrination of these political viewpoints to the masses. We know that indoctrination always comes, and it doesn't necessarily have to be per se religious. They can be political as well. They can be cultural. They can be any viewpoint that is lacking critical thinking. And I believe that what we're seeing is that, especially like when you're looking at this pastor, Jack Hibbs, and he's saying the things that he is saying, and people are saying, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that I agree with that. You know, no one that's saying that is basically asking questions to say, well, you know, how is it that, you know, these other people who are about everybody's rights, except for the ones who don't agree with them, really about that? Like, no one is really like asking questions and actually providing pushback to what he is saying. And therefore, you're going to have a mass of people that's just going to fall in line with what he says, is because they are adhering or sympathizing with his point of view.
And do you think that they probably see him as somebody that can do something for them as well, right? It's to Kelly's point, the ends justifying the means. You know, to sit there and allow this mindset to fester, as long as it results in something coming their way, it probably sits well with them. So we've kind of given a lot of points here on how this person really is not credible. Kelly, I want to get your take on why anybody should believe him. You mentioned that he doesn't read any history after 1925, and so this guy is clearly out of tune. I'd like to ask you. I mean,
he's way out of tune.
Why would anybody believe him? Why would anybody believe him? And then we'll go with Kelly, and then we'll go with Cynthia, and then close out with BB.
Yeah, he is way out of tune. He's even said that slavery was good for the slaves. I mean, this is, I think we're going to talk about that later this week, but that's one of the things he said. You know, the masters took good care of the slaves and made sure they had good food to eat.
A common justification.
Yeah, right. Because, you know, they were over there starving in Africa, living in places like Benin, creating some of the most beautiful bronze artworks that were ever created. So, but you know, they had a better life picking cotton over here. And this is the mindset this guy is. This is why you shouldn't believe this guy, because he is not a person who has rational thought. And he has said so much garbage in the past. I don't know why anybody would believe anything he says today. But what really concerns me the most about him is that people do. He actually has a following. He's found enough people out there with a low enough IQ to actually think that he is intelligent. And that scares me.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I was just going to use a Bible quote, and how he is basically quoting or believing what Matthew 11:12 said. The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. And those who happen to listen to him and others like him, basically, he's one of those pastors that take scripture and twist it to fit a narrative that they are preaching to the masses. And unfortunately, people are saying, well, since he knows the Bible and God has anointed him and appointed him, and he's saying these things, he must be right. So I got to listen to him.
That's the child's mindset, isn't it? When we're all kids, those of us who grew up with religion, well, these really big people are old, and they give me food and shelter, and they must know what they're talking about. Heck, they got to be right about this religion thing. BB, last but certainly not least.
I think there are 3 points into this whole indoctrination thing that has kind of made all of this possible, made these people possible. It's going to be indoctrination into religion, which sets you up to believe pretty much anything as long as it feels good, it sounds good, it fits with what I want to believe. That's one thing. The other thing would be the American education system as it is, because it doesn't teach you how to think. It teaches you what to think. As long as you're a good test taker, you're good. You can keep going ahead. And that goes right along with this religious indoctrination. And the third part would be the indoctrination into just society as it is, especially on a certain side of the political sphere, because what they do is rail against education as a whole. They say that people who are educated are the elites. They make them the enemy. So you feel like somebody getting an education, going to college, you feel like these things are horrible. They're the elites, they're the others. But what people realize when they actually go to college is they get around all these other people that they've heard are so horrible, and you realize they're just people. And you start to see the stuff that you've been indoctrinated into is not real. It's these people aren't horrible. The black person in my class is not going to hurt me. He's actually scared of me because if I'm dressed in camouflage coming to class every day, he's terrified of me. Like you get unraveled when you get into these things. So those 3 points right there: lack of education, indoctrination, and of course, fear.
Absolutely. A great discussion. And on those points, I'll just leave our viewers off with a few more. Slavery being good for people, George Washington being in the Bible. You decide, folks. Make sure you follow the nonprofits for more content. Thanks for tuning in.